The original trilogy of 3D Mario games are some of the most highly regarded releases in Nintendo's history. Super Mario 64 quite literally changed the landscape of gaming, Super Mario Sunshine improved on that, and Super Mario Galaxy perfected it. Or at least, that's what most people think. In reality, these games are often viewed from the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia, and to get a genuine, unbiased opinion on them is quite difficult. Of course, I am no exception to this, but I wanted to do something that could greatly refresh my thoughts. That's why I decided to play all three of these games back to back in hopes of truly finding out if the original 3D Mario trilogy was actually good. Super Mario 64 is one of the most influential games of all time. Without it, the gaming industry would have not become what it is today. Being one of the first 3D games to hit the mainstream market, this game set the standard for how we judge games with platforming and open world mechanics. However, just because something has influence doesn't mean it's still good. There are plenty of trend-setting games that both did and did not stand the test of time, and today I wanted to find out what category Super Mario 64 fits into. Before going into this, I have to make sure it's clear that I have never beaten this game before. I've gone through the first few levels, sure, but never enough to come to a true conclusion about the quality of the game. I've also dabbled in the world of speedrunning and ROM hacks, but realistically I have little to no bias for or against this game. With this in mind, I want to go through and 100% the game by collecting all 120 stars, that way I'll have a fully developed opinion on everything the game has to offer. Now with that out the way, let's find out if Super Mario 64 is actually good. The game begins with a letter from Peach telling us to come visit the castle for a cake, but once we arrive, something is clearly off. A Lakitu flies in and takes the role of a cameraman recording Mario for television. While he is recording live, his role is to be the literal camera in-game, which is pretty cool. I'm sure I'll have a great time controlling him. When we enter the castle, we hear Bowser tell us that he's basically taken over the place, and this is confirmed by the toad next to the door. The only place we can go from here is the first level, Bob-omb Battlefield, which we enter through a painting. I mean, talk about making a first impression. Imagine being a kid playing through this for the first time. The first stage does its best to teach you the mechanics of the game while staying immersive. The second you load in, you have to climb to the top of the level and defeat a boss. The second mission teaches you how to move quickly by long jumping and diving. And some of the other stars introduce you to cannons, red coins, and even the fact that completing certain objectives will give you access to stars. Everything about this level feels like the perfect tutorial since it never holds your hand, yet it isn't overly difficult. Completing this level made me want to give each course in the game a rating, and I like to start by giving Bob-omb Battlefield a solid 8 out of 10. Before moving on, the order of me completing these courses is pretty random honestly. Considering this game gives you a ton of freedom in where you can go, I decided to complete these stages based on how I felt in the moment. Anyway, the next course is Whomp's Fortress, and this was another one that I enjoyed quite a bit. This one had a lot of verticality to it, which was pretty fun to navigate through side flips and triple jumps. This stage pretty much doubled down on everything Bob-omb Battlefield did, but this time with the new threat of falling off the map and being sent out the level. Aside from this cool platforming though, this level wasn't anything special, so 6 out of 10. Next, I decided to go into Cool Mountain. I didn't have any fond memories of this stage as a kid. In fact, I distinctly remember hating it a lot, particularly because of the ice mechanics. Basically, this takes the similar vertical format as Whomp's Fortress, but makes the entire thing slippery. As for the missions themselves, I liked them honestly. There was a cool slide level, one where you had to take a baby penguin back to its mom, and an interesting red coin star where you're encouraged to explore the whole map. At first glance, there's nothing too special about this level, but it does introduce one thing that will be a pretty important criticism I have about the game going forward: the repetitiveness of certain stars. While some stars in previous levels did use similar elements, this one in particular had you go through this slide one twice, and I don't know why, but it just bugged me. The first time you get the star for just making it to the bottom, and the next you're racing a penguin. Did they really need to make 2 stars out of this? Why not just have us race the penguin and make the other star something different? It's essentially doing the same thing twice, and that is particularly annoying when we get kicked out of the level anytime we complete a mission. Anyway, I don't really like this level, 5 out of 10. Oh, and I forgot to mention, when I was completing Cool Mountain, I went ahead and played the first Bowser level. This was actually a lot harder than I thought it would be, especially since I was collecting the red coins. The next stage I went through was Big Boo's Haunt. This was actually one of my favorite levels from a creative standpoint, although it's not actually that great in reality. This is one of the first courses in the game to introduce more puzzle-based missions rather than just platforming, which is still interesting even though the puzzles aren't that complicated. As a kid though, I'd say this was actually a pretty scary place, especially that piano. 6 out of 10. After finishing this stage, I decided it was time to stop ignoring Jolly Roger Bay. Typically I hate water levels, but for some reason I don't mind this one. Perhaps it has something to do with this level not really having that many enemies, making it a more relaxing experience. Of course, the music helps to push that idea even more. Well, actually, everything about this level is calming except for that eel. I don't really know why they had to add that guy in there, but for some reason I was terrified of it as a kid. Anyway, cool level, 7 out of 10. Now that we've basically completed the first floor, a whole new group of levels has opened up for us. I know it's super out of order, but I went ahead and checked out Dire Docks. Actually though, I only did a star or two here before doing something else because this stage is like everything bad about a water level amplified. We'll talk about this later though. For now we had some other stuff to handle. I beat the second Bowser level and also unlocked the Vanish Cap, giving us access to more stars and other levels. Oh, and I don't know why I didn't mention this earlier, but I also did get the Wing Cap. The next real stage I took on though was Lethal Lava Land. While I thought I wouldn't have liked this stage as much, it ended up being pretty fun. Using the lava to platform and take shortcuts was fun, and I think considering how simple this place looks, it had a lot to offer. It was also pretty awesome jumping into the mini volcano and there being a whole new area to explore. And of course, the best part of the level was riding the Koopa shell across it, collecting 100 coins. 7 out of 10. Next up is Shifting Sandlands, and I spent a shocking amount of time here. For some reason, getting these red coins was like the hardest thing I had done in this game, and it wasn't even that bad. Like, they're literally just floating in the sky and all you have to do is use the wing cap, but somehow I kept falling into the quicksand and missing. At this point I started to use save states a lot because the whole boot out mechanic is genuinely stupid and probably one of the biggest criticisms about this game. It's like I can't even afford to die or else I lose 5 minutes of my life. The level itself though was not that bad, the overworld was kinda boring, but the pyramid inside was really cool and I liked the aesthetic of it. 6 out of 10. Next we move on to Hazy Maze Cave, one of the last levels that I'm familiar with. Growing up I hated this stage, and it would typically be the place where I stopped playing. I guess it had something to do with how confusing it could be if you genuinely have no idea what you're doing. To be fair though, the hints in the mission names aren't always clear, and if I had something like the Super Mario Sunshine little preview segments, I'm sure that would have helped a lot. Anyway, I didn't experience that same negativity this time around. There isn't really that much platforming here, so it was admittedly pretty easy to breeze through the entire thing. I don't have much to say about this stage other than that the Metal Mario music is fire. 6 out of 10. With the Metal Cap and Vanish Cap both unlocked, I had access to a lot of other stars in the game, so I got onto doing those and finally got around to Dire Docks again. I did already do some of these stars earlier, but yeah, I really didn't like this part of the game. For some reason, my frame rate would tank when I entered the second half of the level, which sucks because lagging on a 25-year-old game doesn't feel great. 3 out of 10. Now that we've completed the first floor and basement segments of the game, it's time to move on to the top floor and enter Wet Dry World. In my opinion, this level is not very good at all. The concept of the water level changing depending on how you enter the stage is cool, don't get me wrong, but it feels like the execution of it just sucks. There isn't really much in terms of the visuals that save this stage either. There's a nice little town, but even that feels pretty bare bones. 4 out of 10. Unfortunately, the bad levels don't end here because next is Snowman's Land. This is essentially Cool Mountain if it were a lot more boring and annoying. The first level is one of the most annoying stars in the game because you have to climb all the way up to the top of the snowman, but once you reach the top, you get blown off by the wind. And after all that, you have no hat and you have to climb all the way back up now that you know to hide behind the penguin. Besides that, I wouldn't say this stage is particularly difficult, but it certainly isn't very creative either. A redone bully star from Lethal Lava Land, a star that's barely hidden in an ice block, and one that's literally just there for you to get. Like, you just walk there and grab the star. This isn't the only level to do this, but it was especially noticeable here. 4 out of 10. Next is Tall Mountain, a level that is not actually as bad as I thought it would be. It definitely still is really annoying, especially when you miss a jump and fall off the entire level, but besides that I don't mind it. There's nothing distinctively creative about this place, so 5 out of 10. I'm kinda skipping around here, but Rainbow Ride is next, and wow, this is by far the worst stage in the game. From a distance you would think that this is the best, after all it's probably the best looking stage. But man, when I tell you that this level is the biggest waste of time in my gaming life, I think I mean it. You literally just sit on a carpet for half of the stars and occasionally do some platforming. Oh, and if you fall off, well, you'll have to do it all over again. I shamelessly abuse save states here because this is the stupidest thing ever. 2 out of 10. The next course is Tiny Huge Island, and I actually didn't hate this stage. I will admit the platforming here is god awful, and I can't really tell you how many times I bumped into a wall by accident, but overall the concept is really creative. Basically, there's 2 different versions of the stage, one where you're gigantic and the other where you're tiny. The game will give you subtle hints as to what you need to do and in the form you need to be in. I think the stars in general are pretty simplistic, but you know what, I don't really mind them that much, 6 out of 10. The last stage in this game is Tick Tock Clock. Now at first, I didn't really like this level, and that was mostly because of the stupidity of messing up one jump and having to start all the way from the beginning. And well, if you're expecting me to have a sudden change in opinion, that's not happening, this level sucks. The whole concept of it is cool because depending on the clock's position in the castle when you enter the stage, the level will be faster or slower. This is kinda interesting, although they barely use this concept in the stars except for one red coin mission. 4 out of 10. And with all the levels completed and the secret stars collected in the castle, I finally went to Bowser's final level. This was definitely up there with the best designed stages in the game, and pairing that with its epic music made it one of my favorites. Eventually, I made it to Bowser, defeated him, and beat the game. I gotta say though, this post-game scene and the credit roll got me a little emotional, even though I don't really care that much about this game. Also, I did not know Peach had voice acting in this part, so it was kinda strange for me to see that, especially from a Nintendo game in the 90s. Anyway, if we look back at the game and combine the ratings of the levels, we get an average score of 5 out of 10. Do you think I like this game? Alright. I'll admit that Super Mario 64 has some really great parts. When the platforming is done right, this game has some of the most satisfying gameplay of all time. A lot of people want to hate on the controls of this game, and to an extent I agree. It can get sluggish and slippery. The way collision with walls works is bad, but it can still feel great. There are plenty of ROM hacks out there who made the most out of this movement system, so I don't think the controls are inherently bad. I think the real issue spawns from the combination of a bunch of stupid things about the game. Obviously, the camera isn't good. The whole concept of the camera being Lakitu following Mario around was nice at first, but when you actually think about it, it's so stupid. You're telling me that just because a Lakitu can't see Mario means that I can't either? Why? I don't even think that's an issue of hardware limitations, it's just a dumb gimmick. It's kinda funny too, because if you compare it to the other 3D games around at this time, this game probably had the best camera around. Another problem is the level design though. It feels like at first the platforming in levels was simple but still engaging. I would say around that last third of the game though, things started to get really bad. I have no problem with making the platforming harder late in the game, especially when it's in stages that aren't even required to be beaten nor played. But in this case, the platforming feels like it wasn't even tested properly. Like, I had multiple moments in the playthrough where I thought to myself, this couldn't have been playtested and improved by a real human being. Obviously that's an exaggeration, but it's a valid feeling that I had. Also, I noticed that the top floor of the castle had some really bad levels, and I think that it just chalks up to the developers wanting to add more difficulty but not really knowing how to do it properly. I mean, they really just started relying on big drops and falling out of the level to make things difficult. Other than that, there are some minor issues like the repetitiveness, but I can give them a pass on that since it was Nintendo's first real attempt at a 3D Mario game. Despite all of these criticisms, I will say this. Even though with modern eyes this game is kind of bad, during its time it was literally the best thing out. Hindsight will always be 20/20, but Mario 64 was a trendsetter for a reason. No other games were doing it like this one. So if you ask me today if Super Mario 64 was actually good, no, and I'm not afraid to admit that I feel that way. But if you asked a kid in 1996 if it was good, well, I'm sure they'd say yes. Regardless of how I feel about this game, its impact is beyond words, and it's inspired generations of kids to explore things like game development, speedrunning, and even content creation. And that is something that will always stand the test of time. Super Mario Sunshine is one of the most polarizing Nintendo games ever released. On one side, people say that this is the best 3D Mario game ever made, while the other believes that it's one of the worst. When judging a game, nostalgia is one of the most important factors to consider. We associate the better days of our past with the things we did during that time. In this case, Super Mario Sunshine holds some of my fondest memories. When I boot up the game, I instantly remember the food I used to eat, the people I was with, and pretty much everything else about my childhood. As great as these memories are though, they do make the game seem a lot more perfect than it actually is. It's no secret that this game has ups and downs, but what matters is the total experience. I don't mind going through some issues here and there if it means I'll be able to play an amazing game. With that being said, I decided to revisit Super Mario Sunshine to see if it still holds up to this day. I'm putting all my biases aside, both good and bad, and finding out if Super Mario Sunshine is actually good. The game starts off with a cutscene of Mario, Peach, and Toadsworth on a plane arriving to Isle Delfino for a vacation. When they land, it's clear something strange is going on because there's a massive goop monster on the airstrip. We manage to find the water pump called Flood, and that helps us clear the mess. Shortly after this though, we're arrested on the spot because of our resemblance to a criminal who has caused the entirety of Isle Delfino to become dark. After a clearly biased trial, we're told to clean up the island and collect these shine sprites in order to restore the sunlight. We arrive in Delfino Plaza and once again find a goop monster in the square. We take it down and meet the person who has been vandalizing the island called Shadow Mario. He runs across the plaza for a bit before painting a portal on the center statue and disappearing. We follow him in and begin our adventure. Before getting started though, I have to make something clear. This playthrough is not going to be a 100% run, and actually I have a good reason for this which I will elaborate on in the analysis portion of the video, so stay tuned. Anyway, the first level consists of yet another goop monster fight which gets us a shine sprite. And after this, Sunshine gets pretty formulaic like any other Mario game and we get through the levels of Bianco Hills. I really enjoyed the missions here and the secret stages were fun to play as well since I had to work on my precise platforming abilities. Since I gave these stages ratings in my Mario 64 video, I'll do the same for this game and give Bianco Hills a 7 out of 10. I guess now is a good time to mention how all the stages are typically formatted. In each level there are 8 episodes and there will always be a red coin shine, a secret stage shine, and a Shadow Mario shine. Additionally, there are blue coins, red coins in the secret missions, and a 100 coin shine available in each stage. Now keep in mind a lot of this reuse of content is just because there's only 7 levels in this game, a lot less than Super Mario 64, but I'll go more in detail about that later. Anyway, let's continue into the next stage after defeating yet another goop monster, and Rico Harbor is a simple yet fun stage. There's a lot of platforming here which is always appreciated, and for a few shines you get to ride these bloopers which is also fun. Well, except when you run into a wall by accident. There's unfortunately signs of reusing content already here though, because this level has 2 of the same boss fights being the Glooper Blooper. It's not a huge deal, it's just annoying because it's the exact same fight pretty much twice. At least in Bianco Hills, the 2 times you fought PD Piranha were pretty different. This level isn't particularly amazing, but it also isn't bad. 6 out of 10. The next stage is once again kept behind a goop monster fight and it's Gelato Beach. Theoretically, this level would be one of the best since it's perfectly encapsulating that vacation vibe this game brings. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if its level design was all that great in the end. Some shines were cool for sure, like racing with Il Piantissimo or fighting Wiggler, but the rest are really not that great. Gelato Beach has like 2 of my least favorite shines in the game, being the Sandbird and Watermelon Festival. Granted, the latter isn't a required shine to beat the game, so I guess that doesn't have to count. But regardless, I didn't like this level all that much and it felt a little bare bones. 4 out of 10. Fortunately, the next level is a lot more interesting than this and it's Peanut Park. The first shine here introduces us to the true identity of Shadow Mario, Bowser Jr., and he's kidnapped Princess Peach. He seems to have the delusion that she is his mother. This episode uses the roller coaster as a mechanic to take down his Mecha Bowser, which I think is a really great idea, even if it is a little finicky. The rest of the episodes in this level are pretty creative for the most part. We also get to play with Yoshi for the first time here, which I personally love. Around this point, we started unlocking a lot of the other nozzles in the game too, being the Turbo and Rocket nozzles. Anyway, I like Peanut Park a pretty decent amount, so 7 out of 10. The next stage is Noki Bay, which we get to by looking into the sun, a nice nod to Mario 64. This level is actually a lot different from the others because it tells a overarching narrative through each episode. When you first arrive, the bay is polluted and you have to try and find the root cause. After several episodes of trying and the bay still being polluted, we discover that there's a massive eel under the water with dental problems, causing the water to be poisonous. It is kinda silly, but the very fact that there's a story being told through each episode puts this stage head and shoulders above the rest, not to mention the amount of lore they try to build here too. So to me, this is a 9 out of 10 level. Up next is actually a really cool stage, Serena Beach. First of all, the vibes here are off the chart, but besides that, it follows a similar narrative structure as Noki Bay. As you complete missions, the level develops. There are some unique bosses here like the Manta and King Boo, which is a plus. I also like how diverse collecting all the shines are compared to a lot of the other levels which kind of reuse ideas. I'll give this an 8 out of 10. The last stage is unfortunately not a great one, in fact it's probably the worst. As great as the idea of Pianta Village is, it falls flat in almost every department except for aesthetics. Some shines aren't really a problem like the Chain Chomp ones, but as for the rest, it's terrible. The third episode, the Goopy Inferno is one of the least fun shines in the game if you try to beat it the intended way. The secret episode in this level is also really annoying in not only the actual secret area, but also the lead up. Overall, I don't have almost anything nice to say about this place except for the visuals being nice. 3 out of 10. After completing episode 7 in each of the stages, Delfino Plaza will be flooded and Shadow Mario will run into Corona Mountain. When you follow him in, you will enter the final stage in the game. Considering how good the final stage in Mario 64 was, you would think that this would follow suit. However, that is simply not the case. The level begins with a pretty simple platforming segment, however, once you reach the part with the boat, it all goes downhill from here. Controlling this boat is so difficult to do precisely, and if you manage to bump into a wall, you have to restart from the very beginning. This stage isn't even particularly long, it's just annoying to get through, but once we use the rocket nozzle to reach Bowser, we finally fight him and save Peach. With the game complete, the average score of the levels comes out to about 6. Now this seems pretty low, but stay with me. I know I didn't get every shine in the game, and there are plenty of more secrets in Delfino Plaza, but that's because I've played this several times before. But since we've gotten through the main story, I can finally go into detail on the rest of the game's ups and downs. I don't think I need to talk too much about the obvious problems in the game. We all know how rushed it was and all the ridiculous glitches that happen. Instead of that, let's talk about FLUDD. I feel like people either love or hate FLUDD because of how crucial it is to the game's mechanics. Some players feel like it makes the game too easy, while others think it actually adds to the platforming. My personal opinion stands on the side of creativity. I absolutely respect Nintendo's decision for going ahead and changing how Mario moves. This might be a controversial take, but I think this is the best Mario has ever controlled besides Mario Odyssey. Sure, there are a ton of glitches involved with it, but once you're in the groove of things, it feels good to side flip or spin jump onto places you didn't think you could reach before. I distinctly remember trying to get on the top of the Shine Gate before getting the rocket nozzle by just using Mario's basic moveset. Speaking of which, the secret levels are another seriously controversial part of the game. Without FLUDD, everyone who hated that mechanic suddenly loved these sections, and everyone who loved FLUDD despises them. To be honest, the secret stages are quite annoying sometimes, especially if I didn't have many 1-ups and I had to restart the level from the very beginning. Fortunately, these stages will usually give you 1-ups, but sometimes you're not paying attention to your lives and accidentally get a game over. I understand that these are supposed to be a challenge, but it seemed a bit like artificial difficulty sometimes when I had to make it back to the secret level before I could try it again. The platforming in these were actually pretty fun sometimes, but you can really tell that Mario was programmed to move with FLUDD. Without it, Mario feels kind of awkward. There are red coin shines too within these secret levels, and yeah, they aren't that fun. It's hard enough to navigate these without FLUDD, but having to make more precise jumps to collect coins just made it not that great. Also, not sure if anyone else had to deal with this, but sometimes you would unlock the shine for a secret stage and then die trying to actually collect it. This had to be one of the most annoying experiences in the game. Perhaps the worst offender of bad design in the secret stages is in Pianta Village. Trying to angle yourself with the chucksters was literally one of the least optimized parts of the game, and it leaves very little room for error. Not to mention that you have to play it twice in order to get the red coins. The concept is so memorable, but the execution of it was just horrible. I'm not saying that the game would have been better off without the secret levels, but man, I wish they were done a little bit better. The only problems are with the secrets, however. The normal stages actually have a ton of issues that don't really make sense. Specifically, some episodes feel like nobody actually tested the game. The 8th shine in Peanut Park literally makes no sense, so originally shooting these rockets to hit Mecha Bowser in episode 1 wasn't that bad since he was a huge target. But here, you have to shoot all 20 of these balloons in 3 rounds on the roller coaster. Unfortunately, you have no crosshair, so unless the balloons are right in front of you, you're probably gonna miss a few times. The worst part is, if you fail the mission, you just die. Like, not even in a way that makes sense, Mario just collapses out of disbelief. Besides that, you can't seriously tell me that the Watermelon Festival was playtested and approved by Nintendo. I'm not even mad that it's difficult, but the entire process of getting the watermelon to the beach just didn't make any sense. There was no logical path for you to take, no NPC to guide you, just get this watermelon that pops when it touches anything to this tiny boardwalk. I can't forget to mention the numerous levels that are just flat out broken. I personally had no problem beating the pachinko machine stage, but I know it barely works for most people. Look, I've played some hard games before, and I know what real difficulty feels like, and this was not it. Going through this game for the first time fully, I thought to myself, I don't want to shoot these balloons or push this watermelon, and I certainly do not want to ride on this lily pad. And fortunately, I didn't have to, since you only have to complete episode 7 in each stage to unlock the final boss. Whether or not Nintendo used this as an excuse to neglect the design of the 8th episodes, I can't say for sure, but I'm certainly glad I'm not required to beat the Watermelon Festival. It just kind of disappoints me not having any sort of incentive to collect these bonus shines besides a different ending screen. You go into a large majority of these extra levels knowing that you will not have a good time. That is quite possibly the worst feeling you can get when playing a game. While you don't have to play these stages, the 7 episode requirement has some stinkers too. You will never escape from this, or this. Another major criticism toward this game has to do with the lack of creativity in areas. Consider that every world has a red coin, a 100 coin, and a Shadow Mario mission, not to mention the several races you'll do with Il Piantissimo and the dozens of blue coins scattered across the world. Out of the entire 120 shines, I enjoy collecting just a fraction of them. The majority of shines are simply bland and uninteresting, with many being poorly designed. Blue coins aren't helping the situation either, and while I don't have any inherent problem with these bonus collectibles, how are you supposed to know where to find some of these? Certain coins are only available in specific episodes, not to mention the 100 coin shines are locked off from some episodes as well. I understand that this game was released in a time where player guides were popular, but this is just too obscure. I mean, you can't even track which blue coins you've gotten already, meaning unless you want to waste your time, you'll have to write down the location and episode of every blue coin you've already collected. And one last thing, if I haven't made it clear enough how repetitive this game is already, we have to fight these same bosses over and over again in each world. There are a few unique bosses, but they usually aren't even that fun to fight. I mean, that goop monster fight happened like 6 times. Okay, I think I'm done with most of the negatives though. My views toward this game have consistently changed over time. On a first playthrough, the whole island atmosphere is awesome. The fact that all of the levels take place on one island makes everything feel so connected. I still think Delfino Plaza is one of the best hub worlds in all of gaming too. Sunshine's music is still iconic, and I personally would love to hear remastered versions of them. Also, am I the only one who actually liked the cutscenes? I thought it was cool seeing the characters talk and show some personality. Sunshine definitely has some awesome moments, and I would argue some of the coolest locations in all of Mario. However, it is really inconsistent gameplay wise, and unfortunately that hurts it in a lot of ways. So is Super Mario Sunshine actually good? Well, I guess it depends on your views towards its highs and lows. I really think if this game was completely remade, not remastered or emulated, I think it would be phenomenal. Ultimately, I don't think less of anyone who feels differently about this game than me. To many people, the flaws of Sunshine matter far less compared to how I feel about it. Even if going through a full playthrough is a little aggravating for me, I definitely don't mind hopping into the game and going through some of my favorite levels. If nothing else, this game helped bring me into the Mario franchise, and I'll always be grateful for that. Regardless of how I feel, this game will always have a special place in my heart, and I'm sure I will revisit it many times in the future. Super Mario Galaxy is often regarded as one of the best Mario games of all time. Both critics and casual fans alike agree that this game was truly something special. But over the years, my views towards this game have been mostly rooted in nostalgia. I think less of the best parts of the game and more so how good life was as a kid when I was first playing it. When Super Mario Galaxy released in 2007, nobody had ever seen Mario in this light before. Super Mario 64 and Mario Sunshine definitely had creativity in their settings, but nothing like Galaxy was about to introduce. This time around, Nintendo leaned into the motion controls of the Wii while keeping all of the same great platforming from the previous 2 games. The major difference in this title was hardly the controls though, since Galaxy had the game take place entirely in outer space. Instead of a couple worlds with 7 or 8 levels, Galaxy had dozens and dozens of unique galaxies with different missions in them. This massive jump in content from the previous 2 3D Mario games really made me wonder if that translated to just as big of a jump in quality and fun. That's why I decided to go through this game again for the first time in a while and find out if Super Mario Galaxy is actually good. The game opens with a beautiful scene of Mario walking to Peach's castle on the day of the Star Festival until Bowser invades and lifts the castle out of the sky with Peach. After unsuccessfully trying to save her, Mario gets blasted into outer space and wakes up on a small planet. After catching some rabbits, we meet a woman named Rosalina who gives us a Luma that allows us the power of spinning midair. With this, we're told that we can save Peach and stop Bowser. After this, we go straight into the first level of the game and get a grand star. We fly our way to the Comet Observatory, the home of Rosalina and the Lumas. This place will be our hub world for this game, and we can enter different galaxies through these various domes. Basically how it works is that each dome has a bunch of galaxies in it, and those galaxies have their own missions. In my previous videos about Mario 64 and Sunshine, I would give ratings to each stage, but if I did that here, this video would be way too long, so instead I'll be giving my overall review of the domes and talk about the highlights and the lowlights in each of them. First up is the Terrace, and this dome makes a great first impression. Good Egg Galaxy is one of the first levels you'll play, and everything about it is both simple yet impressive. The music is extravagant and the visuals are amazing. It doesn't introduce that many advanced aspects of the game quite yet, but it definitely shows you a great preview of what's to come. Other galaxies here like Honey Hive and Loop-de-Loop Galaxy are extremely memorable to me years after playing this game. 7 out of 10. The next dome is the Fountain, and its style is more around that mysterious outer spacey vibe. vibe. Space Junk and Battle Rock Galaxy are very atmospheric in ways, and they both have amazing soundtracks. The gameplay itself isn't really anything crazy, but it still does the job. Here's also where you'll fight Bowser for the first time, which is a great boss fight with an insane piece of music. The fountain definitely isn't my favorite, but it also isn't bad either. 6 out of 10. The next dome is the kitchen, and this has one of my favorite galaxies, Beach Bowl. If there's one thing I like in Mario, it's a good beach level. This place has a vibe different from any other galaxy in the game, and a big part of that is the contrast from the atmospheric levels that came before it. Ghostly and Buoy Base Galaxy are also pretty cool stages too, one of which introducing a new power-up called Boo Mario. I would say this is one of the more all-around domes in the game, so I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Next is the bedroom, which opens up with one of the most iconic levels in the game, Gusty Garden Galaxy. While this galaxy's hype is mostly due to its phenomenal soundtrack, the level itself is pretty good. I wouldn't say it's the best level in the game, but it's certainly a vibe to play through. I would argue a galaxy like Freeze Flame is a little bit better because it introduces a cool gimmick of everything being half hot and half cold. There are a bunch of cool platforming segments in this stage, and it's one of my favorites. While I'm not that much of a fan of Dusty Dune Galaxy, the first two galaxies in this dome still bring it up, and I will give it an 8 out of 10. The second to last dome is the engine room, and it has an interesting few galaxies. Gold Leaf honestly does feel like a reskin of Honey Hive Galaxy, despite it still having good design. Sea Slide Galaxy though is different from any other. Basically, it's a big ring of water with a series of islands on it. Traversing this place is really fun, and the missions are all designed around that exploration. Toy Time Galaxy is also a good one where you traverse various different toys and household items. So despite Gold Leaf being slightly lazily made, I still do enjoy this dome, 7 out of 10. The final dome is the garden, and this actually is a little bit different from the rest. In my opinion, this dome focuses a lot more on the difficulty side of the game. For most of the experience, this game has been about capturing a unique atmosphere and making enjoyable platforming around it. But in this dome, there are several challenges that will likely require multiple attempts. Things like the Dreadnought Galaxy's Garbage Dump Star require you to have extremely precise timing to beat it, like literally within 1 or 2 seconds of error. Matter Splatter Galaxy's entire concept is you having good reaction time and knowing exactly when and where to platform to. Melty Molten Galaxy features, in my opinion, the hardest star in the game, being Lava Spire Devil Run, where you have to play an entire level without getting hit once, which by the way is pretty hard when almost everything in this level can damage you. Not to mention you have to restart all the way from the beginning if you take a hit, no checkpoints. I'm not really sure if I actually liked this dome or not because I love how difficult it is at times, but others I feel like it was slightly annoying, but I still will give it a 7 out of 10. With all these levels complete, I didn't quite get 120 stars. This is because certain special stars are only available after you complete a normal mission. I reached a point where I didn't have any normal stars I could complete without grinding a lot of star bits to feed a hungry Luma, so I decided it was time to face the final level in the game, Bowser's Galaxy Reactor. This level was pretty much as good as all of the other Bowser levels in the game, and it culminates in a massive boss fight with Bowser. This fight has multiple stages and he fights a little different in each one. The music accompanying this fight makes it feel like one of my favorite bosses in any video game ever. But after this battle, we defeat Bowser and watch as the universe is seemingly reformed. This was kind of a shock to see, but the galaxy turns into a black hole, then all of the Lumas start jumping into it and it turns into a big bang. This is probably the least Mario related thing I've ever seen in a Mario game, but anyway, we're sent back to the day of the Star Festival and everyone's happy. With the game complete, the average rating of the domes is about 7 out of 10. Despite this rating, I would definitely rate the overall experience of the game higher. I think this game suffers from the same problem almost any Mario game does, ups and downs. However, I think Galaxy handles its downs a lot better than the others. Not only are these lulls in gameplay a lot less frequent than the other two 3D Mario games beforehand, but they're not even that bad in the first place. Like, the worst things that happen in Galaxy revolve more around being a little boring than actually being bad. 64 and Sunshine had genuine technical issues at times that made certain levels just not fun to play. In Galaxy, maybe I'll get a little bored now and again because the star isn't that engaging. I will say though, Galaxy has some super high highs. It will have you multiple times throughout the game just kind of sit there and sink in the atmosphere. Whether it's the music or just the visuals, Galaxy does its best to make itself memorable. As for the gameplay itself though, what did Galaxy bring to the table? Well, it changed the movement system quite a bit. It brought back the long jump from 64 and a bunch of Mario's other moves, but the way they feel is a lot different. For example, the side flip is incredibly unresponsive in Galaxy. Comparing that to Sunshine where it was super snappy, I actually didn't like it that much. You really have to get a big running start to do the side flip, which kinda makes the move useless. Mario's overall moveset is very floaty now too. I get that it kinda has to be that way because he's in space, but I don't know, it still would have felt better to have Sunshine's movement in a lot of scenarios. Of course, the spin is a major attraction here though, and I'm a big fan of it too. Making a good course correcting move in a platformer is important, and I think the spin is up there with some of the best. It essentially does the same thing as Mario's kick in 64, but it's a lot more flashy and it fits well with the vibe. Spinning also allows you to interact with the world in different ways. For example, certain enemies will drop star bits instead of coins if you spin into them instead of stomping on them. In other scenarios, spinning is a mandatory mechanic that helps you navigate planets. After completing a task, the satisfaction of spinning into that launch star is like no other. The last major aspect of Mario's movement doesn't even have to do with Mario himself. Instead, it's about the gravity mechanic of the planets. I absolutely love this feature because it reminds you of where you are: space. Gravity isn't going to work the same way it does on Earth, and the game tries to incorporate that heavily into its gameplay. When you're on a tiny planet, you can long jump and basically start orbiting it, but when you're on a massive planet, the gravity is completely normal. Overall, Super Mario Galaxy's moveset doesn't have that same appeal like I felt Mario Sunshine's had, but it fits this game really well, and that's what's important. One big point I have to talk about in this video though is how incredibly packed this game is with content, especially compared to 64 and Sunshine. If you can remember, those two games had a lot of filler content. Sure, there was 120 stars, but over half of those were either 100 coin stars or reused ideas from other levels. In Galaxy, it's basically the opposite of that. There aren't any 100 coin or blue coin shines, and reused ideas are kept at a minimum. There are so many different galaxies to explore, each of which having their own little narratives as you play through the missions. Collecting 120 shines in this game takes significantly longer than the other two games because of this, and I'm glad it's like this. 3D Mario is too important of a franchise to start cutting corners and rehashing content just to say there are 120 stars. Nintendo obviously took Galaxy a lot more seriously than the other two games, from the music being literally one of the best soundtracks in all of gaming to the level design being some of the most creative work they've ever done. Galaxy is truly one of the most complete Mario games. And hey, you can even play through the entire game again as Luigi. So is Super Mario Galaxy actually good? Absolutely, and I personally believe that out of this first trilogy of 3D Mario games, Galaxy is the best in terms of the all-around experience. There's just so much to do here, and I think it really changed how people viewed the 3D Mario franchise as a whole. After Galaxy, people were expecting every game to be just as immersive and atmospheric. And sure, games like Super Mario Galaxy 2 and Super Mario Odyssey might have improved and even surpassed Galaxies in some aspects, but things like flying around with the Red Star in the Comet Observatory or reading Rosalina's storybook bring a different kind of aura that no other Mario game does. The amount of innovation with things like music, visuals, and story puts Galaxy a tier above the rest. Super Mario Galaxy was one of my first games I had ever played, and now I can say that nostalgia I have for it is absolutely justified.